On today's show, we take an early look at some of the free agent targets for your Houston Rockets. How does the NBA draft lottery impact what the Rockets may or may not do in free agency this offseason? What are the biggest offseason needs? Is it shooting? Is it more defense? Is it size? Is it a guard, a wing, a big? We'll take a look at all of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. In the comments, Who do you have as your number one free agent target for the Rockets this offseason? What is the Rockets' biggest free agent need? Let us know in the YouTube comments. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show each and every single day. If you're an everydayer, thank you for checking out the show every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Joining us now for a little Houston Rockets free agency breakdown is Frank from the Rockets Chop Shop. You can follow on Twitter at FTank58. And Frank, this is the magical time of year where, as Rockets fans, we get to take a look at all the optimism. The offseason is so far ahead and wide open in front of us. We got this huge runway of endless possibilities for this Rockets team. They got $60 million in cap space to play with. They already took care of first domino, the major, part of this offseason, hiring Ime Udoka as the new head coach. Still a few more dominoes to fall, though, here, right? They've got the draft lottery to figure out where they're going to be selecting in the draft. Then they got to actually navigate the draft and figure out what they're doing with that pick, whether it falls all the way at the top and means Victor Wembanyama at number 1, or all the way down at the bottom at pick 6, which is like the low-end awful outcome that we really don't want to.
Right.
We don't want to even entertain
not the
it.
case.
Yeah, we really don't want to have to talk about that. But the interesting thing, right, is we're kind of we're almost in this holding pattern where we can look ahead at free agency and some of the available free agents on the market, but so much of it is going to be dictated by what ultimately happens with the draft lottery and whether or not the Rockets keep their pick, trade their pick, whether they get Wemby, Scoot, Brandon Miller. So much of that feeds into how they kind of flesh out this roster this upcoming free agency. And so I'm honestly really intrigued by kind of this next domino and ultimately where it falls for the Rockets.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. I mean, literally franchise altering. Now, honestly, the way I ranked what the Rockets have to do this offseason, the number one thing was we already got it. We could check mark. The most impactful acquisition they can make was getting a coach, because that's going to impact everybody across the board. Then next is going to be the draft. And I think the draft is really going to dictate, like you pointed out, to which direction they go in trying to get different players and different archetypes to come into the building. Obviously, we know who the top two are with Wemby and Scoot. I think there's, Wemby, to me, like, I lean towards being more open with the roster for him. I think Scoot kind of forces some things. Then you go down the line with the Brandon Millers, whoever people have after that. I know that's real controversial, but it's a
honestly, hang on, Frank. Let's get controversial. Give me a few names really quick.
Okay, like, I'm not high on the Thompson twins. I know some people are.
Okay.
I'm not, because I think when I think of the league they play in, I just remember Zion dunking on kids that look like they're in the 8th grade in the high school tape. So that's like the equivalent of OTE to me, because even the age range is like, what, 17?
They're playing against like 16, 17-year-olds right now.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, it's one thing that if they were averaging 30 and like shooting like crazy, but they're not. They are playing like, I mean, they're elite. They're great athletes, and I think that's what they have. To me, like, I'm not high on that. The mixture of non-shooting plus bad competition. So it gets kind of, I would have them like in the 5 and 6 range. I've heard of people moving up, different players. I've heard people move up Cam Whitmore as high as like 4 and 5. I've heard Jarris Walker, which I really love. I think I would have him probably in that 4 or 5 range, because he provides a lot of things that multiple teams need. But the draft it's a pretty good draft. I think we can find our players, but the free agency, a lot of people have been poo-pooing it, and I actually love the free agency class this year because I don't think we're at the level where we need to get oh yeah, we got to go hunt for this guy, right? I think this free agency has depth as it comes to role players, not even just like elite role players, but back end role players, good vets. Like when you look at the list of free agents that are in this class, it's good vets, good solid guys that you can bring in that are going to buy into being veterans, and I think that bodes well for the Rockets.
No, and absolutely. And we're gonna peruse some of these names here in just a moment. We'll take a look at some of the available guards, some of the wings, some of the big man targets, but we're gonna do it as it pertains to how this Tankathon spin happens here. Now, this is a little bit inverse of how we normally do things here at Locked on Rockets. Normally, the Tankathon spin happens at the end of the episode. It's almost like a sign off where it's, bid you farewell, we'll see you next episode, all that good stuff. This time, we're going to let the Tankathon spin dictate how Frank and I navigate this Rockets offseason because, again, we don't know what direction the team is going to go until they figure out who they get in the draft. So, Frank, are you ready for the spin, man?
All right, let me ask you, what's your percentage of hitting on Tankathon? I have to say it's on a scale of, if I had to give a percentage to the worst outcome, I'm probably 90% on the worst outcome and 1 out of 20 landing number 1 or 2. I don't know. Tankathon hates us for some reason.
Look, Tankathon definitely hates me, so I'm in the same boat as you. Any of the everydayers listening to the podcast right now, they will tell you my Tankathon spins have been big trash. So this is really nerve-wracking because we could be operating with a really bum offseason to start, right? If it falls in the 5-6 range and we're sitting here thinking, all right, we got to play GM, put our hat on it, we trading the pick, what are we doing with it? But you know what? I'm gonna say I think it's going to land 2. I'm voting 2. What do you think think's going to happen, Frank?
Let me see. I guess 2 negatives may turn into a positive. So if we both suck at it, so maybe this will be, I'll say number 1. Let me be the upside guy. Number 1.
All right. We got number 1 from Frank, number 2 from me. Let's roll it. Let's see what happens. And okay. All right. We got number 3. That's not terrible. Maybe it is 2 negatives, make a slight positive, right? We didn't get Wemby or Scoot.
No, that's not bad.
Now, the actual outcome of it, we got San Antonio at number 1, Detroit at number 2, Houston at number 3, Dallas jumped up to number 4, and then we got Charlotte at 5, rounding out the top 5 picks there. Let's just, can we pretty safely assume San Antonio takes Wemby? That one's pretty easy.
Yes.
The Detroit taking Scoot one is a bit more interesting to me, but I feel like, what do we want to do here? Do we want to just give Detroit Scoot, or do we want to give him Brandon Miller and just take Scoot for ourselves at 3 as far as this hypothetical goes?
Man, that is a tough question. Now I'm thinking, I've heard from not people in Detroit that they don't see their front office actually making that trade. They're going to get them. They're going to get Scoot if they land on Scoot.
Yeah.
So let's roll with Miller because I don't think Detroit is in a position where, especially with Cade being as injured as he is, I like Ivy. I think they're going to stick with getting that number 2 pick because you can never have enough, top picks unless you're Orlando for the past decade. But
just squandering talent, man. All right. Well, hey, Orlando didn't deserve that stray, but they still got it.
Stray, right?
They still got it. All right. With that, so the Rockets got the 3rd overall pick, which means they're selecting Brandon Miller 3rd overall. How does that dictate the rest of the Houston Rockets offseason? We're going to navigate that coming up here in just one moment. But first, a quick message from our friends over at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage section of the website and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back guaranteed. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And continuing on here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Frank. So I think this might honestly be one of the most interesting scenarios that we have here as far as the Rockets offseason is concerned, because Brandon Miller, to me, does not scream the type of guy that you have to necessarily throw into the starting lineup right out of the gate. I feel like he could very much take a kind of a Benedict Mathurin route and actually come off the bench next season, especially when you consider that with where this Rockets roster is at. I've been saying this for a while, but I feel like the one spot on the court, especially as far as the starting lineup is concerned, that you could add a stabilizing veteran piece is at that 3 spot, right? Because Jalen's going to be a lock to start. Jabari's a lock to start. Sengun is probably a lock to start. And if you don't wind up with one of Scoot or James Harden this offseason, then KPJ is probably a lock to be your starting point guard again next year. So where does that leave the question mark in the starting lineup? And I mean, they were rolling with KJ Martin for a chunk of this past season, but that 3 spot to me screams the position that needs an upgrade where you can add that stabilizing veteran presence to really round out the rest of the starting 5.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, if we were a team that wasn't trying to tank, Jabari probably shouldn't have started. And I've said that, and to me, some people were, it's Jabari. But, there was a world where, back in the day, like Kobe didn't start like his first 2 seasons in the NBA. It's okay for young guys, especially as young as he is, to come into the NBA and have to learn under some better players, and especially if they're better players on the roster. And I think now that we're going towards being a winning team in phase 2, it's totally fine. If there's a better player in anybody's position, even Sengun's, or I think the only person that may not apply to is Jalen, because I think depending on who they get at any of the other positions, those guys may have to come off the bench because, one, the money's there, all the cachet and stuff those players come with. But for Brandon Miller, I definitely think that he's gonna struggle early in the NBA because he's a slight frame guy. That's why I'm okay with him at 3, and I think he kind of probably is the consensus number 3 pick. But I don't think he's a player that just comes into the NBA and is just ready to go, especially defensively. At Alabama, he was kind of up and down on defense. I know he's very active. Like, he's a good, playing the passing lanes, a guy that can do some stuff off ball, but at the point of attack, as a point of attack defender, not very good. Not very good. He gets bullied. So I know it's not in the NBA, it's going to be even worse. So yeah, I would say he wouldn't really impact our free agency, as far as what Coach Udoka said we needed. We need a rim protector and or a versatile defender at that 5 spot, and shooting. And I think he brings a little bit of shooting, but I think that defense is going to lack. So the way I'm looking at it for the free agency, it doesn't really change how I approach what moves I'm going to make, like a Wemby or a Scoot would have.
Yeah, for sure, because the Wemby or the Scoot moves, those are 2 guys that you're definitely going to be throwing into that starting lineup. They're guys who are going to need those reps right out of the gate because you want to make sure that they get, as up to speed at the NBA level as possible. Whereas, Brandon Miller, I feel like you can kind of afford to let him be brought along a little bit more slowly, right? 20, 25 minutes a night off the bench, that kind of thing, and let him, go at his own pace a little bit. Okay, so with that, then where do you want to start here, Frank? I mean, do you want to start with looking at some of the available wings to round out the roster? Do you want to start with that 3 spot? Because I think that to me is the spot that is in most dire need of a direct upgrade, somebody to be in that starting 3 spot for this team, or do you want to take a look at some of the bigs first?
No, we can start with the wings. Let's start with the wings.
Okay.
Let me see. I'm going to go from, I guess, the higher prospects, like the big names, and kind of lower down. And like I said earlier, it's not like a sexy free agency class, and pause, not in that way, but in a way that, like appealing to, the basketball. You hear names like Jeff Green is a free agent. That doesn't really get people going like, oh yeah, bring Jeff in. But he is a free agent. That's a name I like. But obviously the number one that everybody really has been talking about on Rockets Twitter is Cam Johnson. And I've heard people say they would propose as much as upwards of 30 plus million for him. I don't think he's worth that, honestly, because at the end of the day, he's still a role player. And I know the CBA has expanded, the salaries and things like that. But I think him being on like a $25 million contract is well within his range. And I think last I checked, that's what his camp was asking for. So that 4-year, $25 million, that's, $100 million. I would definitely try to get him 6'8", 4. We've seen what he did at Phoenix. I always give a premium to players who can show that they are functional in the playoffs. And he's done that. He's played in the finals. He's played in big games throughout his young career. And I think, the shooting, he's not like a super elite defender, but he's a good defender. And I think day one, that's your starting three if he shows up in the building. Yeah, I would definitely throw a bag at Cam Johnson to try to get him in.
You said you would be hesitant to go, north of 30 for him. I feel like 4 for 25 probably more than likely gets matched by the Brooklyn Nets, unfortunately, because even if you're the Nets and even if you don't envision Cam Johnson being in your long-term plans, 4 for 25 for Cam, so, a $25 million deal, that's a really easy contract to move, right? For a team that does want a Cam Johnson on their roster. So at a minimum, I feel like Brooklyn matches the contract if it's 4 for 25, and then they just figure out, okay, we'll flip him at the deadline for like a first-round draft pick or something further down the line. I don't know what would you be comfortable? Would you go like 4 for 110 kind of thing? Like get him up at 27.5?
Yeah, I think the most I would go is like 28 million.
Okay.
Yeah, around that range. I really, as much as like we like him and we love him, I honestly don't think he's a $30 million player. It just doesn't make sense to me for a guy that's going to be like the third or fourth scoring option on your team. I know it's a position of need, but I could supplement that with a cheaper player and just rely more on the talent I have on board. So that's why I just don't, even though for us, like we have the cap space to do it, I still value our cap flexibility even in the short term. And I think one of the trade-offs that you get, let's say we do make that, like we throw like 28 in Brooklyn matches and we miss them. One of the good things about getting lesser tier players is that you can give them shorter contracts that usually if you do like a 3-year contract, that third year, if it's like like somebody, let me see, like a Jay Crowder or some random wing out there.
Torrey Craig.
Torrey Craig, that team option is always going to be there on the end. So maybe somebody else shakes loose in a year or two that you really, really like, and then you can free up that salary to go and make that acquisition. So I'm high on Cam Johnson, but he's not like the end-all be-all for our at this point in the rebuild. Some names that have come up, Dillon Brooks, a big heck no.
Keep Dillon Brooks as far away from the Houston Rockets as possible. His own team doesn't even want him anymore. I can't. And here's the argument for Dillon Brooks, right, is I feel like, the argument against Dillon Brooks is I feel like, one, he wants like $25 million, right? So, A, he wants to be paid. He wants the bag. 2, he wants a bigger role. My man you don't need a bigger role. Like his role is to defend and shoot, and he's not even really that great at shooting. In fact, he was shooting Memphis out of some games that he was in. There's an argument being made that they were better when he wasn't on the floor because he's kind of a black hole offensively. And then the last one here is, I know that we made the whole point about they need some veteran stability out of that starting lineup, but and I get like he's, a tone setter guy. He brings some of that mentality to your starting lineup, but as far as actual basketball on the court production, I feel like Tari gives you like 80% of what Dillon Brooks does now, and he's a sophomore. He'll be a sophomore. Maybe better. Yeah.
Sophomore year is probably better because Dillon Brooks he's really immature on the court, and I just don't think our guys are too young to deal with that. I mean, like he needs a vet. So he needs to get traded to it. And we don't need to bring a guy in that's like in our situation. Like, so no, I don't. Yeah, I was never on that train, but I know some people like him. No to Dillon Brooks. Another name that's interesting, Grant Williams, is a free agent. He has ties, obviously, to Coach Udoka and from Boston. He's a guy that, his minutes has gone down a lot in the recent times. I know he played a lot today in the game they had, but I really like Grant. Some people have told me he's redundant to Jabari. I really don't see it as that. I think he's a versatile player that you could scale. He could play 3 through 5. And,
he's a wing. I've seen that same argument too. Like there are people who are like, he's a power forward. It's like he guards wings. He's fast enough to guard wings. So you just play him on the wing, and that to me, a Grant Williams, Jabari Smith Jr., and Tari Eason like trio at the 3-4 spot is incredible.
It's elite. I seen him guarding Embiid today. So he's guarding Embiid. He's guarding guys on the perimeter. He's switching out. I love players that could do multiple things, especially at that forward position that you could scale up and down. So, I think he's going to be somebody that, I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at his asking price. I think that it was up in the 20s, low 20s or something like that his camp was asked, or he turned down, I think like 20 million or something from Boston. So, we'll see what he's actually worth. But same for him with Cam Johnson. I would have him even rated lower than Cam Johnson. Wouldn't go crazy trying to get him. Harrison Barnes is another name. I know he didn't look great in the playoff series versus the Warriors, but Harrison's game is like he's a good vet. Like one of the character guys in the NBA. I think that's like not like we're the Warriors or anything, but how they acquired like Iguodala. A guy that used to be kind of good but is faded away a little bit. I think he's one of those type of players. still has a lot of basketball.
And he wouldn't need to eat big minutes, right? Like you could easily bring him in and he would start, but he get 20, 25 minutes a night while you're rotating other guys in and around. Yeah. Good locker room presence. And he's this past season, he was making a little over, $20 million a year, 21.25, I believe.
Yeah, 21. Yep.
And I feel like he's a guy that you could get on a nice, like, given his age, right, and kind of where he's at with his career, I feel like you could get him on a solid, like, multi-year deal, but on a cheaper value, like 4 for 60, maybe, like a slight discount deal, just for more years, more guaranteed money, kind of maybe his last big payday, if you will, if Sacramento isn't wanting to retain his services, that is.
And you think about it, he checks all the boxes that you want from a vet. Former champion check. This is a guy that's been on the highs of highs as a Warriors player, then went to Sacramento, was in the hell of it, the NBA for a couple of years. So he's seen like the bad days of young teams trying to get up. Then he actually went through the whole process of getting them back up to the top. He's one of the guys in this free agency class that has a rare kind of that knowledge of almost every aspect of a team's life cycle. And I think that's going to be something he can lend to our guys. And the last guy I have on my list is Jeff Green. Uncle Jeff, Rockets legend, bubble legend. He played in the bubble.
Bubble legend, like Jeff Green. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think Jeff, he's obviously been on every team, so he's probably can tell you about every type of situation. But he's still, he's playing in the playoffs right now. We obviously know his issues, that he had the heart problem, played in Cleveland, played everywhere. He was a former top pick, high lottery pick, had to go through the journeyman route. I really like guys with stories because when I look back at like NBA history, a lot of the players that made the best bets were kind of these not superstars, but like these good players that were in winning situations that at the tail end of their careers went to young teams and got a young guy that became a superstar, but they put them under their wing and taught them how to be NBA players. And I think our guys have been lacking that. So yeah, those are some of the guys I really like. I do have one freaky one to add on to that. Kyle Kuzma.
Ooh.
I want to hear, what do you think about Kyle? I don't know, man. I don't know, man.
I'm torn on Kuz because all he does is score. Like he's a scorer, right? And he's a volume scorer. The efficiency's not horrendous. It's not amazing either is the problem. Like I don't know if I would want to commit to it right away. I don't think he checks as many of the boxes as you would hope in that spot. Now, maybe if you wanted to commit to him and you were really high on what like Jabari and Tari are going to become further down the line, you feel a little bit better about it. But I think that some of the other names on the list check a few more of those boxes again, especially from like a leadership perspective, the intangibles, the defense that they provide, a little bit more switchability with some of those guys. Like you talked about the Grant Williams. I've got a name for you actually that you didn't suggest, and I want your thoughts on this guy, Jeremy Grant.
Okay. I forget he's in the NBA because he's always hurt. I love Jeremy Grant. I remember we've been trying to get Jeremy Grant.
I know. I wanted him on the Rockets right after the bubble season. I was excited about possibly getting Jeremy Grant teamed up with James Harden. I mean, maybe it could happen this summer, depending on.
Yeah,
no,
maybe.
But
I don't think 13 is coming back. What is his number on Philly? Is it like 1 or something?
It's 1. Yeah.
Yeah, if he does come back, he has to go back to 13. Jeremy Grant is, I think, the prototypical. I think he's a great wing on a veteran team. The reason I like him in a vacuum, like he's a good player. I've been, like we said, we've wanted him forever to come down to Houston. I just don't know much about him as a veteran to really say what his value to our team. So that's why I value this draft class because I really feel like we have to kind of thread the needle of bringing guys that are willing to have the patience to be on a team that's learning how to win. At the same time, providing good basketball and helping our front office and our coaching staff reach those goals they're trying to reach and becoming a winning program. So I think Jeremy's still at the point where he feels like he's a guy, and which is okay. I'm okay with doing that if it's like an upper tier player, but I think he's not at that tier where, oh yeah, you're the guy, Jeremy. I don't think he's that one of those guys. Like if we got like a Jalen Brown or Mikal Bridges, I know these guys are under contract. Those are guys like, okay, you're the guy, you're young, you can, steer the ship. But I think Jeremy, he's probably too good to be a role player for like Jalen Green, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, let me give you these two options then before we move on to our guards and our bigs here.
Okay.
And you get to pick. Are we signing Cam Johnson at 27.5?
Okay.
Or Grant Williams at 22.5?
Oh, Cam.
You're taking Cam?
Yeah, I'm taking Cam.
All right.
The shoe you can't. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I've seen, Grant has had a couple of head scratchers, and he's him moments where he's not him. So,
all right. Well, there we go. We filled our gap with the 3 spot. We got Cam Johnson signed at 27.5 of the projected $60 million in cap space. We still got to figure out a guard, and we got to figure out a big, and we got to figure out if we're going to use that room exception on anybody else. We're going to get there in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, it is so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never really take a moment to think about what you need for yourself, right? To put your needs ahead of others, which isn't a selfish thing, because sometimes when you spend all your time giving, it can leave you feeling stretched thin or like totally burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your very first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here, final segment at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we've got Brandon Miller drafted number 3. We got Cam Johnson signed at 27.5, which leaves us $32 million to play with the Houston Rockets cap space for the offseason, which means your dreams of James Harden are now down the drain. Sorry about that, guys. We didn't walk into this episode with the intention of, going full head of steam, trying to bring 13 back to Houston. And again, some of these names, this offseason, right? Different guys, player options, whatever. Guys like Draymond Green or, I don't know, Gary Trent Jr., different guys who may or may not opt out of their player options. It's a little bit harder to play hypothetical with guys like that. So it's a little bit more fun, I think, to stick with the guys who are full-blown, like, all right, RFAs or unrestricted free agents, guys that the Rockets are going to have a reasonable chance to pursue. So, Frank, letting you steer the bus here for a second. We want to take a look at bigs or guards next.
Let's do guards.
Okay.
Let's do guards. Let's go to guards.
All right. Guard is an interesting one here because, right, so Rockets are very clearly still in need of a table setter, somebody who can, steer the ship a little bit. I think if Kevin's on the roster and there's not a direct, legitimate upgrade to him by way of, again, Scoot Henderson or a James Harden type, somebody like that, I think he's going to be your starting point guard again next season. And I think it'll be your backcourt is going to be him and Jalen. So looking at some of the names on this list of guys that could be brought in, I think there are some really interesting names here. The one that Rockets fans are like super caught up with right now is Austin Reaves. But honestly, man, I don't think he makes it out of LA.
AR-15. I love that kid, man. That he's the guy. He's the goods. I don't think LA's going to let him go, and I don't think he wants to leave, but I'm a Austin Reaves truther, man. The dude is nice, man.
He would be a fantastic get. Even if it, again, the contract structure is weird, right? Where like you could give him like a 4 for like 80 or whatever, but like the first 2 years are like 11 million or something. And then it balloons up in years 3 and 4, super weird contract style based on him, the Gilbert Arenas provision.
Yeah. Arenas rule. Yeah.
And I think there would have to be, if you did offer him a contract like that, I mean, I think the Lakers would have to at least pause for a second to consider, do they want Austin Reaves on their book making $38 million in years 3 and 4, which would happen. I think that lines up with the post LeBron and AD era for the Lakers. And they've got some serious question marks, right? About, do you want to have long-term money committed past those two guys? Because there's a lot of question marks kind of about what's going to happen when LeBron's current contract is over, all that stuff. So maybe he is a bit more gettable, but at least right now it feels like LA wants to retain his services. Right. So let's tackle some of the other names on this guard list. Obviously, Harden's at the top of it, but you're not getting Harden with $32 million left of the cap. Some of the other names that Rockets fans have looked at, mentioned before, Fred VanVleet. I feel like he's probably out of that price range at 32. Going a little bit further down the list, some other maybe more like bargain type options. Seth Curry, interesting option, provides shooting, which is something this team desperately needs. Dante DiVincenzo would be an interesting name to potentially pursue. And then Javon Carter from the Bucks. I think those are a handful of names that could be had on relatively smaller scale deals that don't put a gigantic dent into that remaining $32 million of cap. These are guys that I think could make anywhere from $8 to like 15 mil at the very top end on like multi-year deals. And I feel like that still leaves you a lot of wiggle room to play with the cap space for a legitimate big to bring in.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about those names is that those are players that can play both the 1 and the 2, play off ball and on ball. And I think the way I'm looking at, because if you bring those guys in, KPJ's going to start if they haven't traded him or anything like that. And I'm sure they'd be willing to come off the bench. They give you a different look. Javon Carter obviously brings defense. He's a hustle guy. DiVincenzo's a defense hustle guy that can do some off-ball shooting. I'm not shooting great right now on the Warriors, but we've seen what he's done throughout his career. And Seth Curry, which I would say is my favorite out the group, underrated ball handler. He's pretty decent as a pick and roll ball handler. Can pass a little bit, can play that point guard role in spots. Not a full time, but is a great. Obviously, the shooting he's going to bring puts a lot of pressure. He is a super deluxe upgrade of Garrison Matthews. So y'all just think about him like that. Like this is Garrison Matthews, the gold version.
We got to come up with a bird related nickname for Seth Curry at this point.
I don't know what you would. I don't know if
we'll call him Seth Flurry of wings. There you go.
There you go. Seth pterodactyl or some evolved version of a bird or something like that. But yeah, he is really good. He's a shooter. He's a movement shooter, which I love. And in Coach Udoka's system, one thing that we didn't really have a lot of was off-ball movement. If you watch the Celtics play, they run a similar, not really similar. It's different than what Silas ran in Houston, but they do run a lot of high screens and dribble handoffs and things like that. We've seen some of that with Jalen and Alp. The difference is on the back end, they're actually setting screens for the other players. So they're not just standing there watching. They're always moving off ball. So you get a guy like Seth, I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And you add Jalen's athleticism, Sengun's ability to pass in a short roll, adding shooting really, it's going to really transform the team. So I would say out of those three, probably Seth. Let me give you a name that I like, okay. George Hill. So George Hill is a free agent, and he's a guy that you can get without not missing out on Seth Curry or the guys you named. Reason I like him, same thing with the Harrison Barnes thing. Guy has been around the league. He was, when he was younger in Indiana, obviously an up-and-coming team that kind of worked their way up to being a contender. He's been the point guard on championship-level teams in Cleveland, where, we saw the goof with Game 1 in the Warriors and him that he made that led to the JR thing. He missed the free throws. He's been around. He's a good vet. I think those back of the bench kind of vets, he can give you spot minutes, but a guy that's going to pull your young guys aside and be able to work with them. And what I really love about him is that he's a community guy. Very involved in the community, very involved in activism for human rights and things like that. I just really love high character players that you can bring into the building. And I think George Hill is a player that you could get him on a minimum and still be able to target other free agents that fit some of the other structural needs that we have. And I think that we're going to need at least like 2 guards to bring in.
I love the mention of George Hill, right? He's a guy, and I think George Hill is a guy who's been on kind of like you mentioned with Barnes earlier, right? A guy who has been on both sides, right? He's been with some organizations that have been near the bottom. He's been with some organizations that have had a lot of winning and top tier success. And he fits that kind of combo guard role, right? Can defend, can set the table, can shoot, provides a little bit of everything that you would want. And again, fits both positions, right? Can play with the ball in his hands or play off ball to a guy like Jalen or like Kevin situationally, depending on whatever the lineup on the floor calls for. I would think, though, to your point about maybe be able to get him on a vet minimum, I think that no matter who the Rockets target, they are paying like the bad team tax, right? Yeah, so you're going to have to pay a premium to a guy like a Grant Hill because he's a guy that any contender would love to have, right? Just to shore up their bench unit a little bit. I think if you're the Rockets, you might have to commit a little bit more money to him to get him here. So how about this? We like Seth Curry. We like Grant. How about, George Hill. I don't know why I said Grant. Got my G's mixed up there for a second. How about we do this? We give George Hill the room exception, 2 years, $8 million per. So, slight premium, slightly above vet minimum, but it guarantees you get his services, right? And then we give Seth Curry, 3 years, 30 million, 36? How much do you think you need to get him for? 36?
I think what is he? Let me see.
He's making 8 right now.
Yeah, it'll probably be like 10 or 11, somewhere around there. So
Okay, so slight premium. We'll just give him 12. We'll give him 12 annually.
Okay.
So let's say 3 years, 36, a multi-year deal. We won't have to get too much into the cap logistics of it, but that's 12. So that's 12 for Seth, which counts against the 60 that we were working with. So that knocks us down to, I believe we're down to 20 now. 20 million left. Okay. All right. So 20 million left to play with. We got a couple guards brought in. You got Cam Johnson starting at your 3 spot, which leaves us 20 million to work with towards some of these bigs out here on the market. And the number one name that I feel like keeps getting, Rockets fans keep bringing up over and over and over is fellow Milwaukee Buck, Brook Lopez. I don't know how you feel about Brook Lopez, Frank. Give me your thoughts on him.
I think Brook is an interesting free agent because it's a weird fit, but he fits, but he doesn't fit everybody. What I mean by that is, to me, it'd be awkward to have Brook and Sengun on the court at the same time, because even though they play differently and they have different styles, they kind of overlap in some ways, but the archetype is a bit redundant. So, I've even talked about if Brook was here and he beats out Sengun in training camp, then he probably would start and Sengun would come off for him. And I think he's a level of player, and some people may not agree with that, but it's okay for Sengun to come off the bench. Like I said, it's okay for these guys to come off the bench. And to me, it's almost beneficial for some of them, because it's okay to learn from a player that is at a position that you play that's actually better than you, and you can really go under them and learn, what it takes to get to the level that they're at.
The key is it's okay for these guys to come off the bench for a player that is better than them. It's not okay for this player to come off a bench when there's a guy who is very clearly not better than them.
Right.
Shout out to the OG, to the lob threat.
Lob threat.
Yes.
Bruno Fernando.
Fernando, who's, I don't know where he is right now, but God bless him. But, it's if the players are better. So I think that Brook, I would give it an open competition in training camp, but I think he gets the vet nod. You don't bring in a guy like that just to, I think he's going to play. The reason I like the fit is because you put a guy like that next to Jabari, it gets real interesting, because obviously he's going to be in the role of kind of the drop big, or, how they use Al Horford on the Celtics. And can Jabari be that Time Lord, kind of complementary big that can do, because we've seen Jabari flash some weak side rim protection. He's going to get stronger. He's going to get bigger. The shooting hopefully gets better. And I think that's an interesting fit. Can Jabari be that Giannis role archetype next to a Brook Lopez, a guy that is going to be taking on the big bigs and just lets him roam and be able to cause havoc with his length. So,
and Jabari's been a guy who's shown a desire, right, to help a lot, right? He likes to kind of roam and switch over and, come off of his man almost to his detriment at times, right?
Yep.
And it would almost, in a way, be sort of pseudo reminiscent too of what they did at Auburn, right, with Walker Kessler on the back line and Jabari being able to be a bit more aggressive on the perimeter, and just overall, when you have, there's a weird feeling, right? When you have that like defensive line big man behind you, I think it just kind of empowers everybody on the court, the other 4 guys, to be a bit more aggressive than they otherwise would, because that the game plan is going to be to funnel those guys towards the big who's occupying so much of the space down in the interior.
Yeah. Then offensively, obviously he stretches the floor. He can post up. He's a bully on the glass. I mean, he does everything that you want from a big. I actually really love his game. I think for Sengun, this would be a great, we always talk about like vets for our guard. I think when people think of vets, they always think about Jalen Green for some weird reason. But we have a lot of young guys on the team, and I think that we also need to expand that to Jabari and Sengun, that they need quality vets that can take them under. And, vets don't have to be your position. But I think for Sengun especially, having a player that transformed, Brook Lopez was a non-shooter when he came into the NBA. He had really no bag, and he developed a bag over the years. So, he has a work ethic. So I think just Sengun having somebody that he can learn from and be able to pass the torch to him as he grows and gets stronger and becomes better. And I think like just because he starts, it's probably just like a thing where, okay, he starts, he's a vet, you brought him and you're paying him $20 million to come in. And then, maybe the next year after that or the year after that, Sengun gets on. And maybe halfway through the year, Sengun just plays himself back on the court. Or he just beats him out in training camp. But I think open competition at that center spot is something. There's a name I have for you since you proposed Lopez, which I love. What do you think? This might erase some of the acquisitions we make, but I don't know if you saw a tweet I put out. What about Kristaps Porzingis?
Ooh,
And let me lay my case.
Okay.
Kristaps is bait to me. He fits literally everything that we need, assuming he's not hurt, right? So,
Yeah.
shooting there, he's a rim protector there. Is a complementary piece next to Sengun and Jabari at the same time, which is a rare combination there. So you can play him at the 4 and have Sengun play that drop, and he'll be what I was just talking about. Jabari could slide down to the 3.
Yeah.
He's a vet, obviously been around the league. I'm not sure what he's like in the locker room, but I just think that, he's pretty much Wemby.
Wemby light. He's the first.
Yeah,
he's the OG. He's the OG unicorn. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, he's like, maybe if Wemby is like average, he turns into Kristaps Porzingis. So I think like I'm not like high on his like health. That's I know that's not a thing, right? I'm low on the guy's health, but he is that's his thing. He can't stay healthy. He's banged up. His knees are bad. But I think if you would probably have to pay like in the mid-30s for him. And that would be, a big contract to give him. But I don't know, man. I'm starting to like look down, and I like to get a little freaky with our cap space right now. So I think if I want to get a little freaky, I would go somebody like Kristaps and bring him in. But, I know people.
My biggest reservation for him would be he was unhappy right in Dallas, right, playing that 5-out role with Luka, the heliocentric offense. I mean, how much are you willing to then cater your offense to play the way that Porzingis wants to play, right? To feature him, to give him post touches and let him do this, that, and the other. I feel like your offense at that point would be, you'd be relying on him to be a floor spacer so that you could run some heavy pick and roll. And now he wouldn't be excluded from that. He can run some pick and roll with Jalen, with Kevin. He can be involved in the actions. He wouldn't exclusively be a spot up shooter offensively, but I feel like a lot of his possessions would be him spaced on the wings or in the corners while the primary action between like Jalen and Sengun takes place, or Sengun is posting up, because if you've got Sengun on the court, he's going to be in your dunker spot, or he's going to be the primary screen setter for the ball handler, right? And so he's going to be the one involved in the action more than Porzingis. And I don't know if he would be ready to like subscribe to that role because it's not quite what he did with Luka in Dallas, but it's similar versus him, put the ball in my hands and let me work, right?
I like what they did with him in Washington. And I think, if you're playing with a Luka Doncic, then I think, and that's the complaints we had about Coach Silas's offense, because if you're not the ball handler, you're a role player, no matter how talented you are. And I think that was his frustrations. In Washington, he was able to have a more diverse game. I think that under Udoka's system, he probably would be.
That would be a lot of fun, like big to big action between Sengun and Porzingis. Could be.
Yeah, but it's a lot of movement. I'm not sure what he's like in movement. He seems like a very like either ISO or just catch and shoot player. So, but I just theoretically, I think I really like the fit there.
That's an interesting one. We might have to do another one of these in the future, and we might have to commit some money to Porzingis out of the gate and then see how that fleshes out the rest of the roster. Some of the other bigs that are available though, that just for worth mentioning, so that you can have in your mind that might not fit this scenario, because I think that we got $20 million to play with. I think we both really like Brook Lopez here, so why don't we just commit the $20 million to Brook Lopez and call it a day? I feel like it's going to be really hard for Brook at his current age and where he's at as a player, somebody who's won a ring, right? Maybe a bit ready to kind of ride off into the sunset type thing, secure one more bag. You offer him $20 million a year for 3 or 4 years. I feel like it's going to be really hard to say no. Plus Texas, no state income tax. You imagine Brook Lopez going to his wife and saying, "Hey, I got offered $20 million to go play for the Rockets." She's going to be packing her bags right then and there. Like we're going to Houston. Right. Let's go. And I like, for all the reasons you laid out, I like Brook Lopez. I like his fit either as the backup or starting in place of Sengun, and potentially maybe even some minutes where they share the court together, right? I mean, it's possible. He has the skill set. It's a little risky because Sengun, the foot speed guarding, potentially fours or on the wing, maybe a bit questionable, but it could provide some interesting opportunities for Ime Udoka to experiment with the lineups, at least. Some of the other lower tier bigs, to keep possibly keep your eyes on. Mason Plumlee, Alex Lynn, Trey Lyles, another one that could be had for
I love Trey
kind of on the cheap. Yeah. It's tough because it feels like if the Rockets roster wasn't already full of so many 4 or 5 tweeners, then I'd say like, absolutely, let's go get Trey Lyles. But he's such a 4 or 5 tweener. It's like, you've already got Jabari, you've got Garuba. Tari kind of projects to maybe be like that 3-4, maybe a small ball 5. So you need like a legit big 5. I do think Alex Len is a very interesting name. If the Rockets, in our hypothetical, had committed more money to those, like to the guard and the wing spot, then I feel like Alex Len could be a good bargain big. He's done some good things for Sacramento. He's a big body that you can throw out there, will rebound well, will set good screens, that kind of thing. He's not going to do anything amazing on the court, but he's at least a serviceable big that you could potentially throw out there if you need a very cost-efficient big. But I think that was a successful free agency, Frank. Don't you think? We walked away with Brandon Miller, Cam Johnson, George Hill, Seth Curry, Brook Lopez. That's pretty solid. I'd be ecstatic if the Rockets did that this offseason.
If they pull that off, that would be wonderful. Then you go into the season, year 3 Jalen, year 3 Sengun. You have a year 5 Kevin Porter. I think Jabari and Tari on their sophomore seasons. That should be with Brook, I would say like 35 wins. 35-win team, because we really address, we have a lot of shooting now.
Yeah.
And we don't know what Brandon Miller would even look like as a rookie. Maybe he is legit, like off the gates, and is this like Ben Mathurin 20 points a night type of rookie, 18 points a night type of rookie, where he's just scorching with the.
Nah, man, we already trusted a rookie out of Alabama, and I was burned once before, so it's not happening. It's not happening again. I should say out of the state of Alabama, not the school Alabama. The last time I made that joke, people didn't get it, and I was like, no, Auburn, it's in Alabama. On that note, Frank, do us all a favor. Let our listeners know where they can track you down at, man.
Yeah, I'm at the Rockets Chop Shop. You guys just tap into that. We do live streams post-game since the season's off. I do a weekly live stream on Sundays, me and my co-host Space Ghost. Just talking about current events and things like that. And I also do analysis videos. But yeah, y'all check us out at the Rockets Chop Shop.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how we did with our offseason Houston Rockets picks. What is the Houston Rockets' biggest offseason need? How do you feel about the free agents that we were able to sign over the course of this episode? Let us know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.